Hey guys, welcome to my Full Moon Friday series where I talk about some of the full moon features from my personal collection. Now, if you aren't familiar with Full Moon Entertainment, it is a long running production company known for releasing cult horror movies like the Puppet Master series and other direct to video cult classics. They were popular among B horror fans in the 80s and 90s, and Full Moon still operates to this day and still has a cult following, although I would say the quality of movies has declined. If you are already a Full Moon fan, this might be a fun blast from the past for you. If you're unfamiliar, these videos will kind of help you get started with some recommendations.
What's up guys, Eli here. Welcome to Full Moon Friday. We're finally going to start talking about the Puppet Master series. And yes, I'm going to be doing it in this cool blade mask that I bought a couple years ago. Just kidding. It's way too hot under this thing. I just thought it'd be cool to show it. So the Puppet Master series is what I would consider to be pretty much Full Moon's flagship franchise. It's the most consistent. It's one of the earlier franchises started by Charles Band back in the late '80s. It's one that a lot of people have a lot of love for. I will say it's an interesting ride if you're going to start from the beginning and watch them all. Some of them are nearly unwatchable, just a slog to get through. Some of them are great fun, but overall, I'm definitely a fan of this franchise, to say the least. So first off, we're going to be talking, obviously, Puppet Master, the first one from 1989. This is a really, really fun movie. I just rewatched it last night and loved every second of it. As soon as you pop this thing in the player, you get the opening credits with a really cool montage with a now classic theme song played by Richard Band, in case you didn't know that, brother of Charles Band. Pretty iconic theme song, and I always thought it was cool that it was Charles' brother that created it. I always assumed Puppet Master was Charles Band, kind of chasing the success of Child's Play. It came out just a year earlier, 1988, although Stuart Gordon's Dolls came out in 1986. Tiny Terror type movies were pretty big in the 80s, and at least Band had some cool ideas with the Puppet Master series. I thought bringing David Schmoller back as director was a good idea after the work he did with Band with Tourist Trap. As you might know, I've said in my last video, I'm a pretty big fan of that movie. He seemed to work pretty well. Like I said, they worked well together, at least I thought. And we also had Kenneth J. Hall, who only had 3 years of writing experience at the time, but has gone on to write, direct, and even do special effects work to this day. So after that opening montage, we see the Puppet Master himself, Andre Toulon, played by William Hickey, painting his dolls in his workshop and giving life to his newest creation as fan favorite doll Blade is doing some spy reconnaissance type work as 2 men in black suits are coming for Toulon. His puppets warn him, but he already knows. As he begins to pack all the dolls up in a large trunk, he seals the trunk in the wall as the men approach his room, and then he proceeds to shoot himself in time for the men to kick down the door, Toulon's secrets dying with him. This happened in 1939, so fast forward 50 years, 4 psychics receive random terrifying visions which they believe were sent by a former colleague. So all 4 of the psychics go back to the Bodega Bay Inn, the same place Andre Toulon took his life 50 years earlier. When they arrive, their colleague Neil Gallagher had also allegedly shot himself the day before, his wife claims. None of them even knew that Neil was married, and all of this makes them very suspicious. As the night unfolds, one of the psychics has a vision suggesting that Neil was actually a terrible person, adding even more confusion to the situation. And as the story unfolds, you learn that he was a terrible person, and none of those 4 psychic colleagues actually liked him at all. I like the sort of murder mystery aspects to this movie, kind of saving it what could have been only a slightly unique slasher film. So I assume that the puppets were pretty much laying dormant for 50 years, or they are just that good at going unnoticed. They do need Toulon's kind of special serum fluid stuff to be able to move and get around and be animated, I should say. But for whatever reason, they are now pissed off, and the hotel housekeeper is the first to die, bludgeoned with a fire poker by the puppet Pinhead. Why he killed her, I'm not even really sure. She seemed like a nice lady. Later that night, Gallagher's wife Megan screams that Neil's body was found sitting in a chair when he was last seen in his coffin. I'd say a scream is certainly warranted. The 2 psychics that are a couple are the next to go, courtesy of Mr. Tunneler, the guy with the drill head, and Leech Woman, the female. I think she's the only female puppet. She kills people by pretty much like barfing up leeches onto her victims, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it is gross, and it is cool, and it is entertaining. Neil Gallagher's body is then found in one of the psychic's rooms, the second time he's moved since he died. She is then attacked in a room by Pinhead, but fights him off only to be chased by Blade. She manages to hide in the elevator, only to be found again by Pinhead, who punches her a bunch with his big old hands. She fights him off yet again, but is attacked again by Blade, who this time slashes her throat. She was my favorite of the psychics, but at least she put up a fight. Edit, I just realized that I was talking about one of the psychics and not Neil Gallagher's wife, Megan. I don't think I specified that. So anyways, yeah, that was the first psychic to die. So at this point, only the psychic Alex and Megan Gallagher remain, and they discover Neil Gallagher now somehow back from the dead. He explains to them that he did indeed kill himself, but is now immortal because of his discovery of Andre Toulon's formula. So if you were to try to analyze it and try to make sense of things, it would seem that whoever has the formula has the loyalty of the puppets. You become their master and they will protect you, and in this case, dispose of your detractors. While explaining himself to Megan and Alex, he picks up Jester and one of the puppets, and he throws him down, and this infuriates the rest of the puppets. Neil fights Alex, almost killing him before Alex pushes and traps him in the elevator, where Pinhead attacks Neil but is easily fought off. Bummer, dude, you were on a pretty good roll. Tunneler's got his back, though, so you're good. Drills a hole in the guy's leg. He tries to climb up out of the elevator only to have his fingers severed off by our man Blade. Now pinned down by Pinhead, Blade, and Tunneler, Neil is finished off by Leech Woman, who pukes a giant-ass leech into his mouth, pretty much suffocating him. So I guess he wasn't so immortal. And being the only two survivors, Alex and Megan leave the Bodega Bay Inn and go their separate ways. So spoiler alert, but this is by far my favorite of the original, Puppet Master run from Full Moon. It's a fun franchise, like I said earlier, but there are more misses than hits, unfortunately. That said, I'm really excited to be rewatching all of these. I do wish David Schmoller had directed more of the sequels, but he wouldn't return to the franchise. And that is it for Puppet Master, the first. We'll be talking about the second one here in a minute. Now, for the next bunch of Puppet Master movies, a lot of them are kind of hard to find, so I have this compilation DVD with a shitload of the Puppet Master movies, along with 3 of the Killjoy movies, which aren't very good. So yeah, luckily I have this, so I can watch them and talk about them with you guys. So Puppet Master 2, 1990, less than a year from the first of the new of the now franchise. Usually not a good sign, but in horror back then it was not really uncommon. But more importantly, we're talking Full Moon, which is like the canon films of the horror industry. Oh, and also Charles Band. Unfortunately, David Schmoller would not return to the director's chair, like I said before. Instead, we would get David Allen, who is known for his visual effects work on movies like The Howling, The Stuff, and Q the Winged Serpent. And I assume he pretty much got the job because he also did the Puppet Master, or the puppet effects for the first Puppet Master film. His only previous directing experience was a segment for the Dungeon Master movie 6 years earlier. So Andre Toulon was the only returning character, this time played by Steve Wells. In the beginning, we see Pinhead digging up Toulon's coffin, which is buried at the Shady Oak Cemetery just behind the Bodega Bay Inn, where Toulon killed himself. As the other dolls watch, he pours Toulon's serum into the coffin, reanimating Toulon. I should mention that David Allen was busy directing, so he only supervised the visual effects this time on this movie. And the writing was done by Charles Band, David Pabian, and David Schmoller, who was uncredited. The budget was estimated around $780,000, which was $180,000 more than the first film. So this time around, you get 4 paranormal investigators who are sent to the Bodega Bay Inn, I don't know if it ever says by who, to investigate the murder of Megan Gallagher from the first film. And they mention that Alex from the first film now resides in an asylum after losing his sanity after everything that he saw. and is suspected of Megan's murder. But they only kind of gloss over that a little bit. You never see Alex. The puppets look good here. They never change much throughout the franchise, but since the extra budget clearly didn't go to the actors, I assume it went into the visual effects. But maybe the animation I think was a bit smoother. I'd say I'm no fucking expert on that kind of thing. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the first appearance of the puppet Torch, arguably my favorite of the puppets. And I really have to comment on Steve Wells' portrayal of Andre Toulon because I think he was really entertaining. He just walks around, looking like a sci-fi supervillain, hamming it up and chewing the scenery. And he does, for some reason, remind me of Bane from The Dark Knight Rises with like the way he talks and his mannerisms and stuff. Not so much physically, but yeah, with the way he delivers his lines and stuff like that. I also loved his Faust puppet. I'm just going to mention this from the flashback scene, even if it was pretty much looked like Blade with horns and no hat. But I would have loved to see more of Faust. I think he'd be a cool reoccurring puppet character, but you don't ever see him again. Well, he does get destroyed, but these puppets get destroyed all the time, and they always come back somehow. The climax in this movie pretty much involves the puppets regretting bringing back Toulon, seeing as he is now he's insane. Toulon's plan was to reanimate life-size puppet replicas of himself and his wife Elsa, but the puppets end up killing him and using Toulon's fluid for Elsa instead. This was a pretty fun movie. I'd only ever seen it one time, so I really enjoyed watching it again. I remember not liking it nearly as much as the first, but it's pretty much on par. Maybe I'd say the human characters weren't quite as interesting. They were okay. They were less charismatic and less over the top as the psychics in the first one. Again, like I said, the special effects do look a little bit better. It's all practical effects, slightly better. Like I said, I assume that's where the extra budget went to. But with Charles Band, who fucking knows? I didn't give a star rating to the first Puppet Master, by the way. I think I'd I don't do star ratings. What am I even talking about? I didn't give it a rating. I'd give the first Puppet Master. I would give it an 8 out of 10. It's not a perfect movie. It's very flawed, but it's in my mind it's classic, and I love it. Part 2. If I'm going to give the original an 8, I'm going to give Part 2 probably a 7.5. Still a very decent score. It's very much a watchable movie in this franchise. Not one of the ones that you should skip over. I'd say it's probably my third favorite, but my opinion might change a little bit after rewatching all these. So. All right, next we got Puppet Master 3, also known as Puppet Master 3 Toulon's Revenge, which came out in 1991. 3 movies, 3 years. Again, is that usually a sign of quality? Of course not, but not unusual for horror movies back then. So this time we have David Des-Coteaux in the director's chair for the first time in the franchise, but not the last, which is honestly kind of refreshing. As usual, Andre Toulon is the only human character to return, this time played by Guy Rolfe, who is kind of a fan favorite, probably because he played Toulon more than anyone else, as he would return for the next few Puppet Master sequels. We have Charles Band, C. Courtney Joyner, and David Schmoller, again uncredited, as the writers. So this time Charles Band was working with an estimated $800,000 budget. That's $120,000 more than the previous installment and $200,000 more than the debut. This would be the first in the franchise to fully take place during World War II and detail Toulon's struggles with the Nazis. It takes place in 1941, actually, and Toulon is discovered by the German military via his puppet show he performs at a local theater. The Germans already had a doctor, scientist, working on a drug that could reanimate dead soldiers on the battlefield, but he does not want to do it and is basically being forced by Hitler, which is actually historically accurate for a lot of scientists during World War II. And technically his drug does work, but when the corpses are reanimated, they are completely violent and uncontrollable. You can tell from the start that this movie had a higher budget. It's still a direct-to-video indie film, but it looks much more professional than the first 2. I also have to mention that this is the first appearance of Six Shooter.
Probably my least favorite of the puppets, but he's still pretty cool in his own right. So a decision is made to go on and take Toulon into custody in order to steal his secrets for the Nazi army. In the process, the main villain, Major Kraus, needlessly murders Toulon's wife. As Toulon and the puppets are being transported into custody of the German military, Pinhead and Tunneler kill the soldiers and they escape with Toulon. Toulon then hides from the Nazis and plans his revenge, ordering the puppets to kill any and every Nazi soldier they can. He also takes the puppet he made of his wife and arms her with deadly leeches, turning her into Leech Woman. So this is kind of a Leech Woman origin story. It's a Blade origin story too, as well. It shows shows him creating Blade, which is pretty cool. Toulon's ultimate revenge begins with Pinhead and Leech Woman killing the lieutenant who turned him into the German military. This was pretty much all his fault, ultimately. The puppets continue to slaughter Nazi scum, and Toulon indeed has his revenge with a pretty brutal final boss battle with Major Kraus. Overall, I thought this movie was great. My enjoyment is pretty much on par with the first installment, which I'm also a big fan of. And honestly, this is probably a better movie. Guy Rolfe is a great Toulon. Richard Lynch was a great villain as Major Kraus. And Ian Abercrombie, aka Mr. Pitt from Seinfeld, was a great side character in Dr. Hess. So this is my second watch of this movie. I got a lot of enjoyment this time around. So I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8 out of 10. Same score as I gave the first one. Again, my enjoyment is pretty much on par with the original. And this is probably, on a technical level, this is probably a much better movie. So 8, maybe even 8.5. I really, really, really liked this one. I think I like the second one, but I think this one is quite a bit better. And that's it for Puppet Master 3.